Mr. Cummings, what is good governance when it comes to a country called Liberia?
Good governance is when you have and you create an environment where there is predictability, where there are processes and systems that you can rely on, where there's integrity, where your judicial system works, that is not interfered with, where there's respect for the rule of law, where each branch of government plays their respective role. Those are some of the cardinal of when you have good governance, when people know that if I come to Liberia or am a Liberian and I have a challenge in the court system, that there will be fair and reasonable justice. It's an environment where if I want to go into business, the rules are clear, the processes are clear, the systems are clear. When there's no artificial interference where one person or one branch of government controls everything. These are examples of where good governance prevails. When the rule of law is what governs everything you do. Let me give you a very simple example in the little world I live in. For example, Stan, we have a foundation. That foundation is governed and managed by a board. People come to me as the founder of the foundation and the primary funder, and they say, you gave my child a scholarship, I'm a partisan of the ANC, etc. And I tell them, no, we have a process. Go follow the process. It's online on how you get scholarships. If you qualify, you will get the scholarship. If you don't, you won't. Very simple example of the kind of process is what you call good governance, where the systems run the show, if you will, where you're not on any one individual. Because when you depend on an individual alone, when that individual goes away or isn't around, the systems fall, they collapse. So rule of law, processes and systems, integrity, 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 predictability, predictability, predictability. Those are cardinal adjectives of a good governance system.
So now the question when we ask you, Mr. Cummings, whether you're in Liberia or you travel outside of Liberia, do we have good governance under this leadership?
We do not. You know, that's very clear, and we can give many examples of why that is the case. You can go start with the impeachment of Justice Kabina Jane. Wonderful example of one government interfering with the other and no basis for impeaching a sitting justice. You look at all the issues around the central bank, still no explanation today around the $25 million that was apparently allocated for mop-up. The $4 billion that was printed, the $16 billion still unexplained. Now the request for $48 billion. These are all good examples of where there's governance is unfortunately lacking in our country. And the testament to that is that the inability to attract legitimate foreign investments into our country because the governance systems are completely lacking.
How would then Mr. Cummings restore good governance to Liberia, both nationally and internationally, sir?
Yeah, and it starts by fixing all of these things I talked about. It starts with accountability. It starts with, as the leader, you setting the right example. You're not interfering in the other branches of government. You're not interfering in the processes and systems that are put in place to ensure you have good governance. These are all the ways you do that. And by the way, we'll have work to do in come 2023, after the election, 2024, because the governance systems have all been broken down. So we'll have work to do to restore confidence in the Liberian people and in the international community that good governance has been returned to our country. So it starts by setting an example, getting the right people, restoring the right systems, not interfering in other branches of government, and those things are what will restore some confidence that there's good governance in Liberia. Being accountable, taking responsibility. When things go wrong, when mistakes are made, own it, and then correct it. Those are all things that we will need to do to restore good governance to our country.
Thank you. We're going to be bringing in Dr. Henry G. Peabody. Dr. Peabody, please, on good governance.
Let me begin by congratulating you, Dr. Cummings. You're going to get the third honorary doctorate degree sometime this week. So let me begin by congratulating you. You talk about part of the responsibility of good governance, and one of the things you talk about is the overlapping of responsibility that the current government is faced with. How will you? What are the areas you think right now that need to be addressed immediately when it comes to good governance and in Liberia? What area do you think right now needs to be addressed?
Immediately to restore all the institutions that are meant to ensure that government monies and resources are appropriately spent. So we need to make sure the Liberia Anti-Corruption Agency, the Public Procurement Agency, the General Accounting Agency, all of those agencies need to be appropriately staffed, given the resources to make sure that the checks and balances are in place, that the revenues we're generating today have been appropriately used for the purposes for which they've been apportioned. And so that this whole corruption, and I'm sure we'll talk about corruption, I think it was on your list, Dan, of items we'll cover tonight. But that's one of the first places we need to start in terms of restoring good governance. Look, one of the first things we need to do is to authorize, audit all government agencies on the one, so we can again understand where monies have gone. Another thing we need to do is, again, if I'm blessed to serve our people, I will declare my assets so that everybody will know how much I came into office with. And so as we see any accumulation of wealth, it will be clear that I couldn't afford it. It's making sure that we support the legislative process. We will make sure the judiciary is independent, will not interfere in their processes. So these are all the things we need to do to restore confidence that the governance system in our country is working. I mentioned accountability, consequences. We live in a country, gentlemen, where there are no consequences for anything anybody does. That cannot be. In any organization, in any country, if somebody misappropriates funds, if they break the law, there have to be consequences. And so Liberians need to see that accountability, need to see consequences, and the people leading the government have to set the example, have to set the tone. Henry, if you're the leader and you tell people to come to work at 10 o'clock, go to work at 11 o'clock, everybody will come to the office at 10:45. If you tell people not to steal and you are stealing, everybody will steal. So it starts with personal accountability, personal example, holding people accountable, and making sure the processes and systems work.
My second question, Honorable Cummings, is when you talk talk about good governance, one of the areas that we have seen a lot of decline in our country is the security sector. There are a lot of unresolved deaths in that country. The police have not been able to properly investigate these things, and nothing has been done in order for our country to move forward. How will you respond to that?
The first thing we need to do is we need to depoliticize the national security sector. I believe the national security sector has been politicized. So we have to make sure we got professionals running those institutions, Henry. Have to make sure that happens. Secondly, the thing we have to do is we have to resource it. We have to make sure we got the right people, and they have to have the right tools and resources. And then we should not interfere. Wherever the investigations lead, they should lead, and the conclusions should be what the conclusions are. So getting the right people, depoliticizing it, giving them the tools, the resources to do the work, not interfering in the work, is how we begin to address these unfortunate deaths that are happening in our country, these unexplained deaths. But and then we have to hold them accountable, by the way. So we put the right people, we give them the resources, We allow them to do the work, and then we want accountability. We want to see results for the resources giving them to use.
Thank you very much. We're going to go to Sentiment and George, please.
Good evening, Mr. Cummings, and good to see you again.
Good to see you, Cummings.
Mr. Cummings, one of the problems of good governance, as we're on the topic, is our integrated institutions. Of late, there have been a lot of interference and manipulation by the executive branch with the integrated institutions. And these institutions was put to place in consonance with international or national organizations and stakeholders. So what will you do when you take office in your first 100 days as regard our integrated institutions that have been interfered with by the executive branch of government? What will you be doing to restore confidence in our integrated institutions?
Yeah, Tomlin, as I mentioned earlier, we'll first of all make sure we got the right people leading this institution. And we'll make sure they understand that they have the independence, that they can go after any individual. No individual, no person, no institution, there will be no sacred cows. No sacred cows. Nobody because you're a friend, your relative, because you helped me get elected, nobody will be absolved from the rule of law. And so we'll get the right people. We will make sure they are properly resourced. So it's not just about paying them the salaries. They will have to have resources in the, computers, the tools, whatever they need. We got to restore confidence, but it starts with the right talent and make them properly resourced and making sure they have no constraints on how they execute the responsibilities that they've been empowered to execute. So that's how we will make sure they're empowered, and it'll be something we'll do in the first 100 days.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Cummings, can you clarify? You said there will be no secret card, or you?
No secret cow. So meaning there will be nobody or anybody off limits.
Okay.
Nobody will say, "Oh, don't touch Stanton because he's this or that," or "Don't bother Tomlin," or "Don't bother Ben." Everybody will be subject to the rule of law. Institution will be free to pursue the mandate without any constraints from anybody in the executive branch of government. So no sacred cows. Is a saying where cow that touches this cow because the cow is special, right? No sacred cows. They will have the freedom to execute their roles.
Okay.
Thank you.
My second question. I often hear you talk about Liberians. We continue to do the same things, things over and over, and with the same results. But now, for 174 years, Liberians have been yearning for a radical change. And so my question is, what will you do differently to change what our country have been doing over the years, and that we are still underdeveloped? We are still, majority of people are living in abject poverty today. What will be the radical shift of program that you will bring to the office, and how will you do it, and where will you get the funding from to do it if you say you will make a change? Thank you.
So the good news is we got a lot of time, and I'll give you a long answer, but I think I will answer the question very specifically, because there are many things we need to do different if we want to change our country. So in no particular order, we will start by making hard choices on what we will focus on, Tomlin. Because you cannot do everything and do it well. So within every sector, we will decide what we're going to focus on. Let me give you an example. Healthcare. Everything in healthcare is broken. We're trying to fix everything in healthcare because that's a recipe for doing nothing well. We will look at the data, and do you know what kills 80% of Liberians? Let me tell you, again, in no particular order: malaria, diarrhea, childbirth, hypertension, typhoid. 80% of Liberians are killed by these maladies. The way you solve that in healthcare is by focusing on primary healthcare, having lots of clinics around the country with the right medication, with midwives and nurses. And we'll focus on making sure that it's happening around the country because we'll begin to address 80% of the issue. Not like trying to do every sector, we will make choices. And the same will be true for education or infrastructure, etc. We will make choices. The second thing we'll do that is different is we'll look at the construct of government. I think we need to revisit the whole idea of decentralization. Because for too long, everything is centered around Monrovia, right? We got to be careful how we centralize, but we got to look at the construct. You cannot expect different results if you organize yourself the same way. So we got to think how we organize the executive branch of government so that we get different outcomes and different. So another thing we need to do different. The whole area around accountability, Tomlin, around this corruption thing, we gotta address it. We gotta go after people who are absconding the resources of our country. And we gotta be determined, and nobody should come and beg because that's what happens, right? Tomlin becomes whatever he becomes. He steals. We go to punish him and people line up. His wife comes, his cousin. So, oh, you know, that you were on his show the last time, the man was nice to you, he helped you get elected. We don't want to hear any of that. Tomlin should have known better. So again, this corruption thing is something we gotta be serious about. And as the leader, you have to set the example. You know, this excuse, oh, it's a small country, blah, 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 nonsense. That's why I go back to this, no sacred cows. There's gotta be consequences for bad behavior. And that's another thing to do different. Getting the right people, you know, there's a saying that getting the right people on the bus, the right people to lead the different agencies. I will put a lot of attention to the superintendent of the various counties because those people represent the head of state. And if we're going to think about decentralization, you need to have the right people in NIMA, in Maryland, in Bong, etc., etc. We want the right seats on the bus to drive. So those are some of the examples of things we'll have to do different. We cannot keep, and I will say to the Liberian people, by the way, we also cannot keep selecting the same people because they're popular, because we sympathize with them. We got to help our people understand it's got to be about capability, about competence, and we need a different set of experiences, right? So those are all part of the conversations, the dialogue we need to have if we're going to change our country.
Thank you very much. Kev Hassan, please.
And how are you, Mr. Cummings? And welcome to the Spoon Talk. And I'm glad you're here to answer the tough question. That's one of
Thank you, Kev.
That's one of the things we look in our leaders for tomorrow to answer the hard questions. You talk about right people. Let's talk about the Cummings administration. Who are the right people you're talking about? Do you have any names of right person? Who are the right people? What are the character of a right people in your administration?
Kev, I would describe the kind of people. I don't think it's appropriate to give names. So I will not give names. Let me just be emphatic. But we will look at the responsibility that we're asking this individual to carry out. And we'll make sure they have the requisite experience, academic backgrounds. We want people who have delivered results. We don't want people who, again, because just on paper, you know, they look good. We want to look at the backgrounds. What has this individual, he or she, what have they done? What have they delivered? Have they managed an organization? Have they managed a business? Have they had a previous government role that they did well in? We want people with integrity so that when we look at the backgrounds and what they've done, we are clear that, you know, they've got the right values, the right integrity. Those are the characteristics of the kinds of people we will put in government. We're not going to care about religion. We're not going to care about gender. We're not going to care about tribe or nationalism. We want the right people. The good news is we got good people across our country. every tribe, every religion, every gender. So it's not a question of discriminating against anybody, right? But we make sure we got the right people with the right characteristics to drive our country forward. That shares a common set of values, that shares common principles in terms of what we want for our country, that show care for our people and not just for themselves. So those are the characteristics of people we want on the bus to drive this country forward.
My second question to you is...
Sorry, Kev, if I may. And for me, the right people to try to identify is not just in government. We want to start, and we're starting to put some names now. We want to identify those good people in civil society, and we want to encourage them to stay there and support them. We want to encourage and identify the right people in the church, in the mosque, so that we know these people with the same values. We're encouraging them in the private sector, in NGOs. So it's not just about government. Yes, we will focus there. We want to identify good legislators, good judges, good lawyers. So we got to think about this holistically if we want to change Liberia, so that people in all of these sectors are demonstrating, right? Because the person sitting in Encyclopedia will see some local person in the church or in the mosque that they will emulate. And we want to make sure we've identified around the country those people that we are supporting. We have the same principles, we have the same values, so that together we can drive the change we want in Liberia.
Okay, my second question to you: you have worked in the Coca-Cola industry for a while now, and a lot of people out there is saying there's a difference between running a Coca-Cola and running a country. Can you make it clear to our people, how can you transform yourself from running a Coca-Cola and running Liberia?
So great question, Ken. And I'm glad you asked it very seriously, because it is not as different, and I will give you very specific examples why it's not as different as people portray it to be. So running a government, you're running a large, complex organization, very large, very complicated. In Coca-Cola globally, you're running a large, complex organization, in the case of Coke, in over 200 countries. So, same large, complex organizations. And I'll tell you what the differences are too, by the way. But that's a similarity. Second, that is similar is you're managing large budgets. You're managing money. You're managing resources. In the case of Liberia, you're managing this $400 million number, and we'll come to that later on. Because we are fixated on that number, we need to grow that number. In the Coca-Cola company, our annual budgets are in the billions, literally billions of dollars. But the fact is, you're managing resources, you're managing, you're making choices, you're prioritizing. Third similarity, you're managing people, you're managing teams of people. You can identify people in government, you can identify teams of people in business. Next similarity, you got to deliver results. In the case of the Coca-Cola company, you deliver results to the shareholders, to your consumers. In the case of the government, to the voters, to your constituencies. So they are very similar in terms of large, complex organization, managing people, managing budgets. You have to do it with integrity, or you shoot in both situations. And so it's not as different as anywhere you got people, you got politics, Kev. Anyway, now the degree of politics in politics is more. You got more politics, there are more dynamics to manage. So that is a difference, but you got a bit of politics in business. You don't get to where I got to at Coca-Cola by not understanding politics, understanding human psychology, having some sharp elbows along the way, because the pyramid is steep. You don't get to where I got to in Coca-Cola by not delivering results every day, every week. You're measured. Look, gentlemen, and people listen to my voice. At Coca-Cola or at the Pillsbury company, it wasn't my father's company, my brother's company. There were not other Liberians there to help me. You had to earn the right? And that's the kind of discipline we need to bring to our country. You're managing systems and process. I mentioned earlier, we sometimes are too dependent on the individual. Yes, the individual is important, but what systems and processes are we going to put in place? And this is where, again, to your earlier question, the team you assemble, both in and outside of government, is key to the transition of our country.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cummings. Let's bring in the former chairman of Liberty Party, Benjamin Senvi.
So Cummings, it's good to see you, and thanks for coming. It's good to hear that Mrs. Cummings is doing well. Good governance. What would President Cummings do on his first day in office in regards to good governance, specifically in regards to what my brother Tommy and George talked about, re-injecting some confidence in integrity institutions?
So the first thing we'll do on day one, we will issue an executive order authorizing the right institutions, whether it's the General Accounting Office or the Liberia Anti-Corruption Agency, as I mentioned earlier, to start conducting an audit of all agencies of government, so we know exactly what we take over, what we inherit. And for them to do that, on day one, we will appropriate the resources necessary. When we take office, then we will have clearly in mind who is going to be leading that agency, not just at the top, but in the key roles. We've identified them, and they will know they will be taking over those responsibilities. We'll have the resources, and they will have the authority. They already have it constitutionally, but any other authority required, we'll make sure they have it so that they can begin an audit of all the agencies of government to make sure we know what we inherited, to begin to start to reassure the Liberian people and the international community that we're serious about integrity, we're serious about anti-corruption, and we want to bring anybody to book who has violated have been corrupt, if you will. So those are some of the immediate actions we'll take on day one with regards to these agencies.
So my second question has to do with also good governance, but relationship between the executive and the legislature. Too often we have seen the legislature, in some instance, become subservient to the executive, and I'm being very nice by even saying it that way. What kind of legislature would a President Cummings want to see? What kind of legislature would you want to work with? What kind of legislature would you want to work with to enhance the effort in promoting good governance?
Look, the way we will change Liberia, gentlemen, is by holding each other accountable, by pushing each other to do better, by not settling for mediocrity. And so we want a legislature that will play the constitutional role of oversight, of holding the executive branch accountable. And by the way, part of how we'll do that, right? And let me say, we will want to support PP legislators who will share the same vision for the country, who will share the same priorities we have so that we can work together. But we also want them to play the independent role. Because if they're holding me accountable or the branch accountable, forget me, I don't want to personalize this, whoever is president, and we are holding them accountable and the judiciary accountable, that's how we'll move forward. If we are playing nice, if we keep doing the same thing, gentlemen, Liberia is far behind. You guys travel, you've been to other countries, you live in other countries. We got work to do. We got to push each other. We got to be demanding of each other. It doesn't have to be disrespectful. So we want a judiciary. We want a legislature that will play their role. That's what I want. That's how you push. That's how you build organization. That's how you build systems. It's not about being nice. That will never change. And I have interest. A situation where, we kind of all doing the same. It's our time now. I tell people all the time in the ANC, if you support him because you want your chance to be big shot, or you want your chance to chop, I am not the guy. Then you should keep supporting George Weah or go support George Weah. We need to be demanding of each other. We need to set the bar high and then push each other to drive this country. Look, I wish and I hope, I don't think it will happen, unfortunately, but I really hope in the next 3 years, this administration needs to do things differently and better to improve the lives of Liberian people. Will it make it more difficult for us to make them a one-term government? Yes, but it will benefit everybody. That means we gotta work harder. That means we gotta up our game. That means we gotta have better ideas. But we can't wish for Liberian people to be suffering just because we want to take state power. I have no interest in that. So we want a legislature, right, that plays the constitutional role. We will not do any of this brown envelope stuff. I'm sorry, we'll stop. We have no interest in this brown envelope. They gotta play the role. They gotta ask the hard questions, and that's what will move all of us forward, move this country forward. Let's be tough on each other. Let's raise the bar. Let's not settle for mediocrity. That's how I got to where I got to. Thank God, I was blessed. A lot of providence, by the way. I don't take complete credit for where I find myself today. But it was discipline, it was hard work, it was competition, it was accountability, it was held to a standard. And that drives you, that pushes you. I run into young Liberians who are smart. They inspire me, right? If we create an environment, then this country will thrive. It will change faster than we think. But we have to create the right environment. We have to have the right leadership that sets the example for people to follow.
Mr. Cummings, let's just, you know, and I like the way in which we're going, because in talking about good governance, we come into corruption. So we're going to do a mix up of these talking points, and you can jump in, gentlemen, because when you hear corruption, your mind goes back. Ask your question, don't hold back. That's what Mr. Cummings is here for. Minister Doe, Deputy Minister of Youth and Sport, as a Doe, please jump in.
I can't hear you.
No, okay. Go ahead, Minister Doe. Let's try to bring you in. There you go. Go ahead, sir.
Am I okay now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me say hi to you, Mr. Cummings. And just to let you know, as a Marylander myself, I feel proud to see a fellow countryman and a fellow countyman tell as high as you've done. It gives some of us the inspiration to do good things in order to be where you went. Right now, it's about leading a country different from where you were. And good thing we are discussing good governance right now, Mr. Cummings. You will agree with me that ethical conduct is one of a semblance of a good governance. You are a member of the CPP, and within the ranks of your collaboration, there have been many persons with questionable characters, questionable ethical conducts. The country has never heard from you against any of those conducts that will always be questioned. Can you make the Liberian people understand how should they trust yearning for good governance to be a reality and not the usual political talks?
Thank you, Minister Doe.
Yeah, thanks, Isaac, and thanks for your opening kind words. It's appreciated. Well, first of all, it's not true that I have not spoken to some of those questions. By the way, I did an interview on Truth FM a few weeks ago. I also like to be. You were a bit general in your question, but I was asked questions around Brownie Samakai, which I answered, and if you want, I can answer my response. I was asked a question about Musa ability, and so it is not true that I have not addressed those issues. And again, if you want me to, I'm happy to address those issues.
Please, Mr. Cummings, if you can, please address it.
Before I address those issues very specifically, let me say the following. And you know, as a country, as a people, we also got to be realistic about where we find ourselves and the situation we find ourselves in. In any collaboration that you're in, you're going to have a wide spectrum of individuals. I will also say to you that I don't judge people based on allegations necessarily, anecdotes, or what other people say. I judge people based on the facts, on what I see and observe with them, And that's important for Liberians to understand that my judgment is not influenced by the noise, if you will. It's based on the facts and the reality and the relationship I observe and see with the individual. Very important. And now, anybody who breaks the law, etc., friend or foe, family or not, will suffer the full brunt of the law. So in the case of Brownie, we issued a statement, the CPP, and I don't know if you had a chance to read it, Isaac. It was very well thought through. And it started by saying, look, as an institution, and I believe this too because I signed up to that statement, we believe in the rule of law. And yes, we may have a lot of questions about the court and the judiciary, the fact that the court made a decision with regards to that particular situation. And the courts meted out the punishment. And in that statement, we said we will abide by that. And I believe Brownie by himself and his team organization, they are abiding this. They started to put monies back because that's what was required to pay back. The same the same Supreme Court, the same rule of law, in a separate case, also said that Brownie should take his seat. You cannot pick and choose. You can't say on the one hand, you accept what the court said, and on the other hand, you don't accept what the court said. I believe that's what this government is trying to do. It's trying to pick and choose. And we're saying we're rule of law. We got questions about the court and about the veracity of the court, but we support the rule of law, and therefore we accept and we accept both outcomes. Pick and choose. In the case of Musa, we got clear that these are allegations, one, from an organization, FIFA, and Musa is appealing that process. This is a fact, right? And oh, by the way, FIFA is not the most, I want to be careful with my choice of words, they're not the most blameless organization. They have their own issues as well. Let's also be clear. But that's the first thing I would say there. We want to be clear that these are allegations, it's being appealed, there's a process in place, and I believe in following processes, as I mentioned earlier. The second thing I would remind you, Isaac, is that we're in a collaboration. The Liberty Party is an independent party. They elected Musa as chairman. We respect that decision, and we, as a collaborating party of independence, we support that decision. And the last thing I would say goes back to my earlier point. I judge people based on my experience with them as well. And my experience with Musa has been good. Everything he said to me is done. He's been one of integrity. And so that's how I've answered. So let me land by saying, though, finally by saying is that these people or anybody else, for me, is from the standards that I set for myself, and I think Liberians should set for people who want to lead, them.
Coming with your second question, Minister Doe, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cummings. Recently, we had one of Liberia's renowned lawyers here on this platform. He unfortunately, sorry to use the word, but I would say recklessly, accused the president of murder, because this is rule of law we are discussing as well. Mr. Cummings, do you believe that this president is involved in murder?
I do not know, but I don't believe he is. You know, when you start to throw around those kind of allegations, for me, that is just too flimsy and loose. I think I said on this program before that we have to respect the office of the presidency. And like it or not, George Weah is our president. We can debate and we can talk about his performance and all those other issues. And I'm sure we'll talk about that tonight. And I will opine. I have opinions on all of that. It will not surprise you as I do. But to throw around allegations that anybody is quote unquote a murderer, some substantive proof of evidence is something that I do not subscribe to.
Mr. Cummings, then thank you for that answer, because the guys on the platform tonight are going to come back on your answer. But within your position, you're saying you do not agree. But let us go back to the issue of Musa Belete and Brian Samuka. On this program, we just don't like it just to just brush it off the shoulder, you know. We want to know and we want to understand. If you were in the position as stand-up bearer for Liberty Party, what will your decision be like on Musa Belete? If you were in a position as stand-up bearer of UP, what will your position be like on Brian Samuka? Will you have asked Brian Samuka to just leave, go?
Stan, if you follow any of my interviews in the past, I try to stay away from hypotheticals, right? Because I'm not stand-up bearer of the Unity Party. I'm not privy to the decision-making processes. I'm not stand-up bearer of the Liberty Party. I'm not privy to the processes or decisions there. I have described to you and the panelists here, and by extension of the Liberian people, how I think about these two situations. And so to hypothesize what ifs, etc., I'm not prepared to do that.
CPP going against George Madam as a collaboration. You guys are going together. ANC, UP, Liberty Party, and ALP. Probably other individuals, other parties going to join you guys. Because of the accusation, because of their behavior, what sting this have put on CPP as a whole?
I think Liberians view CPP holistically. And I don't believe Liberians just look at CPP as, look, CPP is not Jesus Christ, Muhammad, right? Liberians are practical about how they think about CPP, and that collectively, what they believe CPP can do, stand. Liberians are comparing CPP to CDC, and they will make the relative decision is in aggregate, in totality, do they believe that the CPP will provide better leadership to this country? And I believe they will conclude the answer is yes. The CPP is not perfect. The CPP has flaws, is not perfect, but in aggregate, when you look at it holistically, I believe that when Liberians make the decision, they will go the CPP way because they believe it will provide better governance, better leadership, grow the economy, et cetera, et cetera.
So we are not saying that, well, there's a corruption issue in CDC and there's a little corruption issue in CPP. That's not what you are saying.
No, absolutely not. I'm just saying that Liberians will look at the two organizations, the two parties in this totality, and they will decide how best, and I believe they will go the route with CPP.
So let me ask a question, then we can go to Dr. Peabody. Come 2024, let's say the CPP decide to take you as stand-up bearer. Come 2024, you won the election, and now, thank God, inauguration president. Will you bring in someone like Musa Belete or Brian Samuka into your administration?
I will bring people into the administration as I described. I think it was Tomlin's question about the characteristics, the experience, the kinds of people we want to bring into administration. And if they meet those characteristics, the characteristic of competence, the right experience, the right values, the right integrity, etc., they will be a part of the administration. If they do not meet the criteria I've outlined, they will not be a part of the administration. So I would look at the criteria that we've set, some of which I've described, and we'll judge people based on that criteria.
Have they met your criteria now?
I have gone person by person, looked at the criteria and said, does Brian meet it all or does Musa meet it all? I have not gone through that process. But before the administration, that's a process we'll go through.
Brian Samuka served as 12 years. He's the longest serving defense minister in the history of Liberia. Musa Belete president. Musa Belete running good businesses. People spoke of him. Musa Belete having one of the best radio stations, the biggest in the nation, as he said. Musa Belete been around for a long time now. He's the chairman of Liberty Party. Have they met your description to bring them into your government
Those-
if you are choosing to be the president?
Those are all positive considerations that we'll look at in deciding whether or not they come into our administration. So I'm glad you listed, Stan, the positive attributes that Brandon Semakai would bring, and the positive attributes that Musa Belede will bring, and we'll consider all of that. And by the way, we'll be comparing to other people who bring attributes as well in making that decision. These decisions are not made in absolutes. These are all relative decisions that we'll make. But again, those are all positive attributes that this gentleman will bring, and they will be aptly considered in making decisions of whether or not they join the administration.
I hope that is serving well with the listener out there, because we are not getting yes, we are not getting no, and you still trying to understand their behavior. But thank you, Mr. Cummings. We're going to do one question quick. The next conversation on this, as we move to Dr. Peabody, would be the question on the economy. We spoke of corruption. You can jump in with that, but the economy, and the culture of impunity, gentlemen. Just do your question together, two questions each. Thank you, Mr. Cummings. Dr. Peabody.
Dr. Cummings, as I will call you, looking at our country, a few months ago, we had the finance minister here, and he said that the country was doing great economically. They had a surplus, and we had the LRA director here who said that the revenue generation is going good and it's going fine and all of that. But we still see the country is struggling. The country is still getting assistance for budgetary assistance all the time. How will you compare our economy today? How will you describe it?
Yeah, I don't know what universe the finance minister and the Liberia, I don't know what universe they live in, by the way, when they make those assertions. Because for me, the way you ultimately define the success or not of the economy is, how is the average Liberian doing? How are they feeling? Are they prospering? And so you look at the fact that since this government came to power, civil servants are not being paid consistently every month. Fact. Since this government came to power, salaries have been reduced for servants. Fact. Call it harmonization, but it's been reduced, and they're not getting paid consistently every month. Since this government came to power, the Liberian dollar has devalued. Fact. It was around 110, 120. It's around 170 today. Fact. Oh, we're not making this stuff up. Unemployment has increased since this government came to power. So I don't know how you measure, how you can say that the economy is doing brilliantly. Every budget they've put forward on the revenues line, they have not achieved their revenue targets. So again, by any objective measure, gentlemen, not Alex Cummings' measure, right? Not CBP measure, the economy is not performing well. And the ultimate verdict of that was the December 8th election, when the opposition, CPP and all opposition parties, won a majority of the senatorial seats. Liberians were sending a message. They were giving the president and his administration a grade that they were not happy with it of the country. So again, I don't know what world they're living in when they come and make those economy.
Thank you. My second question, Dr. Cummings, what will you do to address the current situation our economy finds itself in? What will you do to address it if you were president?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, the hole is deep and it's getting deeper. And so there are many things we'll have to do to address the situation. Well, we're going to have to restore confidence and accountability to the government and to the management of the economy. We'll have to make sure we got the right people on the economic team, with the right qualifications, the right background, the right experiences. We have to make sure we got the right people. We got to restore confidence. Then we got to make sure we're going after this corruption issue, because you cannot restore confidence, you cannot start to generate more revenue, which is something we need to do, unless you plug the hole. You cannot have a bucket that's leaking and you try to add more water to the bucket. So we got to plug the holes before we start to focus on growing the revenue. Then we got to decide where we put our limited resources. Agriculture is an area where we have to focus on and invest in agriculture. We have to make sure we are enabling the private sector by looking at our rules, regulations, the whole taxation regime to make sure it's business friendly. We got to make sure we're supporting Liberian businesses. Look, today, Liberia is an import dependent economy. 90+% of what we consume we import. Fact, right? And it would take a while before we can change that dynamic. Importation, gentlemen, ability to import is not rocket science. It's not even algebra. It's arithmetic. I import for 10, I sell for 11. I import for 9, I sell for $9.50. I import for 3, I sell for $3.50 or $4. Liberians can do this. So we will make sure, and I will also add that the government is the biggest procurer of resources in this country. Again, it's the wrong paradigm. It's the wrong construct. It shouldn't be, but it is today. Make sure procurers that Liberians are the agents of that, because again, it's not rocket science to be able to do that. We have to provide them financing. We have to introduce them to the primary suppliers to make that happen. Those are ways we can empower Liberians while we begin to, grow the economy by attacking corruption, by restoring our integrated institutions so that they can do their work, by getting the right people to drive and lead the economy, by investing in the right sectors. These are all the things we need to do to drive the growth of the Liberian economy.
Thank you. Sintomani George?
Mr. Cummings, right now in Liberia, the biggest thing is the economy. Given the current situation of our country, can you explain your economic recovery plan for Liberia? I know in one of your interviews you talked about you will put the Liberian budget at $1 billion. You will make care of $1 billion. Can you tell us what you do in your first 100 days to achieve that goal?
Yeah. So, Tom, we're not achieved $1 billion in 100 days, though. So, I mean, I know you know that. So, but these are the steps we will take. And let me tell you why I came up with that number. And actually, that number should be higher over time. But very simplistically, this is simplistic in it, and it's illustrative, just so you and everybody understands. The Ghana is about 5 times our population, roughly, right? I think there are about 25 million people, roughly. We have about 5 million people, roughly, right? I believe their annual budget, and again, I'll be in the ballpark. It is not precise because it's somewhere between $8 and $10 billion, right? So if we're 20% of that, and again, this is simplistic. There may be reasons why we should be more or we should be less. Right? But 20% of 10 billion is 2 billion, right? So I just make that to say, look, this number just directionally is not out of the question, right? The second thing I would say before I get to some of the details is it's also a mindset issue. It's a paradigm we got to break. We stuck on this 405 million. I don't know more people say, recurring expenses are 80% of, but it's 80%. But if that number was $1 billion, it would be 40% of it in terms of recurring expenses. So again, I want us to break the paradigm, to start thinking more creatively, to challenge ourselves, right? To push each other so that we can grow and expand the economy. So let me talk about some of the things now you need to do to grow that revenue number. And I started to talk about some of those things earlier. First of all, again, you got to plug the holes. You got to make sure the money you're collecting is not seeping through. There was some allegations, some in the papers last year, earlier this year, where the Revenue Authority said they were reporting X and the Ministry of Finance was reporting Y, something less. That sort of stuff should not happen, right? So we need to make sure we're plugging the holes. Next thing we need to do is look at what are our sources of revenue today. So in no particular order, again, customs and excise duty, mining, forestry, maritime. Are we getting the full value from the current sources of revenue? And I'm not suggesting that they are not. I'm just saying, but we need to make sure is Mattel paying us what they should be paying us. I'm not saying they aren't or aren't, but we need to know, right? Or whoever is running our forestry or whatever, we need to make sure we're getting full value from the existing revenue resources. 2. Then we got to look at what are some new sources of revenue that can drive this growth in our budget. And then the most important thing, though, is we got to grow and we got to create jobs. Let me tell you an area that I think we need to focus on that is under leverage, and it's tourism. And I would say ecotourism. The added eco is important. As tourists from the West think about tourism and you add eco, they're not expecting 5-star hotels because we don't have that. They're not expecting perfect infrastructure but they want to rough it up. They want to live in a tent or in a hut. They want to go to the Sapo forest. They want to take a canoe across Lake Piso. If you emphasize that, you create low jobs, service-oriented jobs. You generate monies. The government will earn taxes on that. You begin to grow your revenues. If you start to invest in other productive sectors, like agriculture, over time, you begin to generate revenue. You create jobs, you begin to export. So those are the kinds of actions we can do so we can start to grow that. One of the things we'll do in the first 100 days, we'll announce a team focused specifically on driving the growth in revenue. Because we can talk about healthcare, education, all of these things. If we don't have money, it's just talk. We're just wasting our time. And yes, we will borrow. Yes, we may get help from our donor friends, but it starts with us. And we'll have a team that will just focus on how we maximize revenue, how we grow revenue, so that in a 3 to 5 year period, that number can go from $500 million to $1 billion. And these are some of the actions we need to take to get to that. But the point is, it can be done.
Okay, a good. President Weah has been president for 3 years and counting. And he's running for re-election. We had the former vice president on Friday. We listened to his chat with Mr. Costa. He laid out some. Even though he wasn't specific in his policy plans, but now you guys are contesting to be the president of Liberia. Now, the Liberian people are listening across the globe in Liberia. So, can you tell the Liberian people today what will make Mr. Cummings the better choice to succeed President Weah and the CPP to be the standard bearer of the CPP? Can you just make that contrast between Mr. President Weah 3 years in office and the guys, your colleagues in the CPP that are vying for the same position?
Yeah, look, the best way for me to answer that question, Tomlin, is just for me to recount the experiences I bring. And the Liberian people, the CPP partisans will decide whether that's what they think the country needs, right? The Liberians will make that contrast, and then they will decide, and the partisans of CPP that contrast. But let me tell you what I bring to the party. As I mentioned earlier, I have managed large, complex organizations and deliver results consistently. And to the earlier question from Kev, where I compared government to a large private sector company and the similarities. Look, gentlemen, at 36 years old, I was the youngest officer ever in the history of the Pillsbury Company when I became vice president of finance for Pillsbury National. That was earned, right? And since then, I've delivered results. I've hired people. I've built teams. I've hired people. I bring integrity. I bring a process and systems mind, because again, as I mentioned to you earlier, to all of you earlier, is that we take a team of us to transform and to change this country, processes and systems to change this country. And I bring all of those skills. I bring a track record of doing those things in a global enterprise, not just in one country. A country in a company that has businesses across the world. You know, sometimes I get criticized because I'm so meticulous about time, and I call people and say, I'll call you. People say, just pick up the phone and call me. The reason why I do that is because when I'm calling a guy in Japan, I need to know he's picking up the phone, because time is money. We gotta get from point A to point B. So I bring all of those experiences to bear to help to transform our country and our people. And again, I think Liberians need to decide whether they think those are the skills we need. I bring a history of integrity. Totally, I've managed literally millions, billions of dollars. I've been audited backwards and forwards. Yeah, no misappropriation, no allegations. You can Google designer Cummings, right? And you will see the job I've had, the monies I've made, etc. No scintilla, right? That's what I bring you. Results, large complex organization, managing people, managing interests, making tough decisions, hiring people, firing people, processes, systems, right? These are the things I bring. And my passion for Liberia is undiminished, will never be diminished no matter what happens. My navel is buried in this country, right? And passionate about doing something to change our country. And I want us to push each other. That's why I like this conversation, by the way, right? Because you're asking the tough questions, you're not letting me off the hook. That's how it should be, because that's what we'll do to change our country. And again, we can't keep doing the same thing and expect different results. We can't keep letting the same people with the same experiences and assume Liberia will change. It will not.
Before we get to Chairman Senvi, you're talking about time. You're talking about hiring. You're talking about auditing. You spoke about declaring your assets as well. When you were the VP at the age of 36, and all those years you served under the company, did you ever hire anyone Liberians? That's the question out there. Were you opportune to invite some Liberians over to under your initiative, get them involved into what you were doing? Because this is about Liberia too. Can you talk to the Liberian people whether you had the opportunity to help Liberians?
Stan, the answer is yes, and I will give you examples of where I did that in my career, where we've hired Liberians. But this is what we gotta get away from, because I can change that question and say, okay, so you from Maryland, you should only hire global people. Yes, if global are qualified, of course we'll hire them. They're from my county, my father's county. But we got to be careful how we think about these kind of questions and what our people expect us to do. But the answer is yes, I did.
Can I jump in real quick to make some clarification, Mr. Cummings?
Let me answer the question, though.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Give me a chance. The last person who ran all of West and Central Africa for the Coca-Cola company based out of Abidjan was a Liberian. In fact, he retired in December. Was a Finley's cousin, Rocky Finley. I hired Rocky into the Coca-Cola company, actually in South Africa, and he moved up on his own merit. By the way, for me, this is important. It wasn't because he was Liberian.
Okay.
Right? This is an important point. In the North America business, in the finance function, there are Liberians that we help to influence the hire. They're Liberians in the technical organization, because that was the area that I managed. Liberian, he just left Coca-Cola. He's a scientist. He works for Wrigley now in the United States. He had patents to his name. He used to work for the Coca-Cola company that we were influencing hire. But when you put a Liberian label, it's like I was doing them a favor. And again, these people earn it. They happen to be Liberians, and they were qualified, so we leaned their way. And that's how we should think about this thing. This was not my father's company, right? Because then the Americans will say, Coca-Cola is an American company. Why do we make this Liberian man chief administrative officer globally. It should be an American, right? So I'm just pushing back a little bit. The answer is yes, we hire Liberians. Yes, we did things in this country philanthropically all over the years. We didn't make it public, but we should not take away the meritocracy, which is what we need in this country. The reason why everybody wants to know the leader, because they don't trust the system. They don't trust the processes. Yeah, that their work will surface and people will see it, and therefore they'll get promoted, right? That's the kind of behavior, the kind of thinking I want to bring to bear into our country. So it's based on meritocracy, on results.
So let's talk about. Thank you. Let's talk about your company, because, and I'm going to push on that in that direction, because Liberia first. You want to be the president of the Republic of Liberia. So right now it's about Liberia first. So let's talk about you raising your NGO, why you were there or when you left. You spearheaded that company, and you guys raised almost a little over $100 million on one of your NGO. Can you give us the name of that NGO fighting against HIV and other diseases out there, and how that benefited Liberia? Because you say it helped other African countries, and I wanted you to tell us how that actually benefited Liberia directly.
So it wasn't my NGO, just to be clear. It
was the company.
It was a foundation. It was called the Coca-Cola Africa Foundation that I established while I ran Coca-Cola Africa, that was initially focused on HIV and AIDS. And it was initially focused on HIV and AIDS on the employees of the Coca-Cola system. And so employees of the system, and so we had a plant. They call it Coca-Cola factory. We had a plant here. And that any employee at the time who had AIDS were provided free medication for treatment, and their families. It provided AIDS education. So it did benefit Liberia for the purpose for which it was set up. The Coca-Cola company also had this effort called 5x20, where it was trying to empower 5 million women globally in small businesses. Liberians benefited from that year in Liberia through that process. But again, it's not a function of, because this wasn't my power company, this wasn't a Liberian company. But to the extent the business in Liberia merited to benefit from those things, they did. And that actually did happen under my watch and post my watch. So I am very proud of the work I did at Pillsbury and at Coca-Cola. I'm very proud that Liberians were hired and benefited from these things, but it was based on the merit, on the fact that they deserve it, and not because they were doing them a favor or whatever. It's a very important distinction for us to make, because again, it's part of what we need to teach if we're going to move this country forward.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairman Ben Senvi.
Mr. Cummings, I'm going to flip a little bit into small politics and ask you a question that is lingering. Oh, I'm sorry, my pen, sorry. Why are you running? There are those who believe, right, that you should not be running for president. That maybe you should run for the Senate. Or maybe you should be vice president and then find your way, work your way up. Why are you running for president and not vice president or senator?
Because, and I will answer it from multiple perspectives. First, because it is my goal and my ambition and my aspiration to serve all 4.5–5 million people. And the job through which you can do that and impact all is a presidency. And that is my aspiration, is to make my case to Liberian people, to give me the chance to serve them and to serve all of them. So that's the first answer to that question. I care about our country. Some of the same opportunities I have, I think we can bring to bear for our young people. I see the suffering that is happening here, and I think we can do differently, we can do better. But I want to impact all 5 million or so Liberians. One. The second thing I would say, Ben, and this might offend some Liberians, but the reality is, if you put a child into a bad, dysfunctional environment that hasn't worked, that doesn't work, high odds, high chance that child will not turn out to be a good child. The behavior will not be good. And so getting experience in a system that has not delivered results, I don't know how useful that is, to be honest. Our president today was a senator. That has not made any difference in the performance of his administration. Fact. So we got a government or system that after 173 years has been subpar. That not to say there were not good people along the way, that there were not some good leaders who did some good things for our country. In fact, there were some leaders who did good things and bad things. But there were good people along the way. But in aggregate, in totality, we find ourselves where we are. And so, again, I'm a very rational person in that sense to say, but if you look at other examples, right, of people who work in that system, yet you see the outcome and the output of the system, or you see what they've done with the opportunities they've had in that system. What have they done? What have they achieved? And I don't see what it is. I would question myself, why do that? But the primary reason, though, is the opportunity to bring the experience I've accumulated in almost 40 years successfully, to bring that to bear, to help all of our people, to serve all of them. So we touch all of them. And unfortunately, because we're over-dependent on this job called presidency. And that's something we need to change. But for now, that job is a job that impacts all of these things. And so my aspiration is to impact all Liberians, and that's why I'm aspiring for that role.
So let me ask you the next question. It's also political. Sure. There are those who say you don't have a base. Where's Mr. Cummings' base? Example, the late Brumskin, my former standard bearer, may his soul rest in peace, had Grand Bassa. It was dependent. It was almost certain that Brumskin will win Bassa. Your competitor for the CPP's nomination, Vice President Borkai, Lofa. In fact, the 2017 election showed that that's the only county he won, right? So it shows that is his base. But there are people who, where is your base, Mr. Cummings? Do you have a base that you can rely on that will propel you and get you across the finish line? Do you have a base?
So, great question. And I will give you more answers to that question. But let me first start by saying I sort of challenge the presupposition of the country that how you define a base. Because you are defining a base band geographically. And I think that geographic definition actually limits us, has been a limiter. It indirectly plays to dividing us, to tribalism, to sectionalism. I think we need to redefine constituency more broadly, because I'm not going to be aspiring to be president of Maryland or of Nima or of the Southeast. I'm aspiring to be president of Liberia. And I think we should redefine constituency. My constituency is the young Liberian youth who do not have jobs, who need to be educated. The market women who need financing, who need the business to be propelled. To the disenfranchised citizens who are disappointed by President Weah. That's how I think we should be, and define that. I think I have constituency across the country. Look, we did the arithmetic. It is not hypothetical. You can win the presidency, or you can at least get to the second round by getting enough votes in these key counties, right? You can get to the second round without winning any one county outright. And if you go back in our history, President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, I believe from Bomi, small county. I don't know if she claimed it was her base, but that did not propel her to the presidency in 2 terms, right? So we need to read this in constituency. And the other thing about constituency is, if you look at other countries, constituency as described geographically by you, people are loyal to institutions, not to individuals. So let's look at Ghana. The MPP and the NDC, it doesn't matter who the standard bearer is. There's certain geography in Ghana that will vote for the MPP candidate, whether it's President Kufuor before, Akufo-Addo, whoever. Same with the NDC. Certain parts of Ghana will vote for whether it's John Mahama, Atta Mills, or whomever. In the United States, whether it's Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, New York, Illinois, California, they vote for the institution. They're not voting for the individual. In Liberia, Monserrata was supposed to be George Weah's constituency as an individual. He raised Tamafala hand. They voted for Darren overwhelmingly. We need to redefine this constituency stuff. We shouldn't be in the past. There's not a basis for it because, again, I think it's and that's why we need to build institutions, Ben. Because institutions endure. Individuals come and go. They leave, they die, they get sick, whatever. Institutions endure. And demographically, as you define, or geographically, institutions, historically around the world, they tend to be loyal to institutions, not the individual. Individuals come and go, they do that. But I also think in Liberia, because of our history of tribalism, of sectionalism, we need to think about constituency in a different way. And I have some examples of how I think about those constituencies. And those are the people I'm appealing to professionals who get it, to the young people who need jobs, to the women, to the underserved, to the people who are taking advantage of. Those are the constituencies I'm appealing to across Liberia, because I want to serve all Liberians, not just a particular county or section.
Thank you.
I'm telling you, Mr. Kwame, I'm sorry, gentlemen, if you're hating something, I don't know which one of us, because we're trying to hear Mr. Cummings very well, please. Or maybe we can mute when Mr. Cummings is speaking. Mr. Cummings, we're going to take the next question from Kev Hassan, please.
Mr. Cummings, I'm going to go back to corruption before I go ask you a question on the economy. But I was not actually satisfied with your answer on Mr. Weatherspoon's question on the Samuka and ability. And let me directly ask you this. The rule of law, is Samuka is a criminal in your view? If we're going to go through this and the standard of the Supreme Court, is he a criminal?
Mr. Samakai was, per the Supreme Court ruling, was convicted and was and his punishment was meted out. And so, per the Constitution, that's what I believe. And Mr. Samakai is in the process of restituting, because that was the punishment. And so, per the Constitution, I believe the law, they made a decision, and that's a decision that was made.
So you believe he's a criminal by the
Kev, I've answered the question the way I've chosen to answer the question.
Okay, sir. Okay. You make a statement on another station concerning going back to 2018. In your view, 2018 was a better time in our country. And when this president came to power, he met 514 million USD, 7 million of the US and 550 million Liberian dollar, 7 million USD. So when we do the calculation, all that is about 14 million and change in there. In your view, you're saying 2018 were better, right? And this president make it and made it worse. So I'm asking you this: do you know how much it takes to run a government monthly?
So, yeah, let me tell you the way I think about it, and we should think about how we hold people responsible and accountable. So there's a rule of thumb that when you take over responsibility for a government or company or organization, that the first 3-6 months, you can blame your predecessor for whatever you inherited. So if you only inherited $14 million, whatever the number is, so you can blame the person before you. After 3 years, that responsibility is yours. The question to President Weah and his team is, what have you done since then? You can only blame the past for so long. In the world I grew up in, the maximum they allow you 6 months to bring your predecessor. After a year, you still bring your predecessor, they look at getting rid of you. Because now the problem is you need to be solving the problem, and blaming the past is not the answer, it's not the solution. So my challenge to you and other seditions is take responsibility, own it. The government is not yours. We elected you, or not we, because I didn't vote for President Weah, but the Liberian people elected him to improve their lives, to make things different, to make things better. And that is not happening. That is my point. And going back and blaming the past, yeah.
I'm asking you specific. Do you know how much it takes to run a government monthly? Do you know, as an executive of a big company, do you know, have you ever tried to look at it? Do you know how much it takes to run the government of Liberia monthly?
Yeah, so I can do the math very quickly in my head, by the way. So if the government revenue is $500 million, right, and 80% is recurring, that's the cost of running the government. That means $400 million on an annual basis, assuming, right? And so you divide that by 12, and you will get about $40 million a month to run the government. So that's a quick math, and I will be in the right ballpark.
Thank you for saying that. So we're saying if the government met and 540 million in their account, right, plus 7 million USD, 540 million. We're talking about and almost 14 plus USD if you do the math, the USD and the 7. How can this president run a country with $14 million USD with a government that need, in your math, $36 million to run a government? So are you agreeing with me right now that when the president said that he met a broke economy, are you agreeing with me based on your math?
Absolutely not. You're putting at a point in time, a static point in time. This thing is dynamic. So on day one, the government cost you $36 million, you made $14 million in place. What were you doing in the remaining 4-5 months to get that 14 to the 36, to get it to 100, etc., etc.? You can't just judge by a point in time. Yeah, that's not how the life works. That's not how the math works. What did he do the rest of the year to get that number up? How did he try to plug the holes? How did he try to go after making sure we got the revenues in place? Because at one point, those people were getting paid. So the money was coming from somewhere. What has he done? What has this government done to get that money back up to where it was? That's the question we should be asking ourselves.
So you're saying to me,
not a point in time. So life is tough. He inherited a difficult situation. Check. But what has he done about it? What has he done to improve it?
So you're saying, right? you're saying to me, this president met a government with you are saying he did. I'm responding to your question. You are saying he did, but I'm responding to your question just to be clear. Okay, this government came in. This government came in a system that we don't have a huge revenue. How can this government manage with our first 6 months to meet her budget? How can this government? What can you do within our 6 months if you enter into a broke?
So
what will you do?
Let me. First of all, I wouldn't be chartering private jets to be flying around to go to meetings. I wouldn't be carrying live delegations with me to sort of go to meetings. I would put the government on an austerity program. I would not be hiring more people to add to the payroll to take that number from 36, 25, 40 million to 50 and 60, I will not be doing any of those things. I will be going on a strict austerity program because I only got $14 million. So what can I do to manage to that number? But more important, how can I get out 14 to 15 to 30 to 40 to 50 or 60? I will not be flying around on private jets, hiring more people, making the problem worse, and then cutting the salaries of the people who are already there. I would not be doing those things, I can assure you. And 6 months from the day I hired it, that number would have been back to where it was, at least if not higher.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cummings. And again, we said 2 questions, but can't forget, we gave you the chance and you asked 5 questions. Thank you for that, but we got to move on. When we come back, you can jump in with your question. Minister Doe, please. Go ahead, Minister Doe.
It's frozen.
All right, so Minister Doe, I'm sorry, we are not getting you, and you can work with James.
Are you
all right, you do. Yes, sir, you are.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Comment, I like the discussion we are having, especially when it concerns getting our country better. And like I said, I'm always proud of Liberians who've excelled high. I got 2 quick questions from you, and I wish to just put 2 of them up front just so you can answer them. The first question is, in a recent time past, you made a statement in which you said you believe in the tendency of the leader eating last. Mr. Cummings, as a person who has spoken a lot against corruption, why do you think Liberia should be a country where you eat or eat should be promoted? And then the second question is, one of the problems we have faced in Liberia with the fight against corruption, actually, the ability and the capacity of our existing court system to handle corruption cases. The current president, in 2 of his last State of the Nation addresses, has proposed the creation of a corruption court, something he sees that will expedite trials of alleged corruption acts. Do you think that the president is on the right track to fighting corruption? And will you be willing to join his efforts encouraging the national legislature to pass legislations to realize this? Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
So Isaac, you're my homeboy. So the whole things around quote unquote leaders eat last. And I guess the word focused on there is eat. And in context of Liberia, people think eat means corruption, means you're stealing, right? And that's the construct you're asking that question. But let me say to you, first of all, there is a book talks about leader eat last, and that book speaks to what's called servant leadership. And the word eat is illustrative, is figurative. It's not literal, but the example that I use in that to people is that you're there to serve your people. You let them go first. And the little example I use, and we do this in the ANC, when we have meetings and stuff, and we're serving food, we're serving a buffet. Typically, what happens in Liberia, the table goes first, and then if at the end, if there's no food left for the rest of the people, nobody really cares because the head has eaten. What we do in the ANC is we make sure everybody in the audience eats, and we at the head table go up like the buffet because we control the resources. That way, everybody will eat because we will make sure enough food there for us to eat. That's the illustration of leaders eat last, is that you take care of the people first, you serve them before you take care of yourself. You're not the first person at the head of the table when you eat. So the eat is not stealing, it's not corruption. It means you feed your people first. You take care of their needs before you take care of your own needs, before you eat. So again, don't take my word for it. Look up servant leadership. Look up Leaders Eat Last. You will see the book, and it will explain the concept that I'm trying to say to our people, that you want to elect and select leaders who will look after you, who will make sure you're fair, who will make sure healthcare systems are in place. All of those things before they start to build houses for themselves and travel on private jets, all that sort of stuff. They will make sure the people are looked after. So that's the point. Again, I encourage all of you here, listen to my voice, read that book. You will understand servant leadership and the fact that leaders should not be the first at the head of the table. They should. When we go to events here, I get annoyed when we go to rallies and stuff, and people bringing me water when they out in the sun, not serving them water, and I'm like, but these people been waiting for us. They're in the sun. We're not giving them water to drink, and you giving me water at the head table. That's the idea, Isaac, of Leaders Eat Last. You take care of the people first before you take care of yourself. On the corruption code and that sort of stuff, look, I have to say to you, and I know you're no disrespect to you, Isaac, you're a minister in the government, and I respect that, and you're serving our country in that way, and we have to acknowledge that. But this corruption code that the president is doing, I think it's lip service. The answer is, should the legislature pass it? Yes, they should pass it. Should we have a corruption code? Yes. Should it be empowered? Yes. But this government is not even using the existing institutions. They're not funding the LSCC. They're not funding the GSC. They're not funding the PPPC. So let's start with resourcing the existing one before we create a new one, and then it will be their own paper, right? But look, the sad reality is this government has been called a kleptocratic government. And it's a big word. It means, in simple terms, it means a roguish, right? Government, right? And that's the perception out there. That's how people think about us internationally. We are the laughing stock of the region of the world. People say the USA says something different. No, read the USA letter. It was nuanced. They got to wait for the people here on the ground, so they had to nuance the letter. It said the same thing, right? So for me, it's about the substance. It's about the reality of what you do. It's not about, legislation is important, and yes, they should pass it. We should set up a code. But let's start with existing institutions. Let's make sure those are working before we create ones. And let's, through our behaviors as leaders, demonstrate what we want, how we want our people to behave. So that would be the response to both of those questions.
Minister, thank you, Minister Doe. Mr. Cummings, why should CPP send you as the standard bearer, unlike Jose Yima Bwaka? Distinguished, please.
Yeah, look,
and Europe, but I want to talk about Jose Yima Bwaka first, then I will come to the others.
Yeah, look, as I answered the question before, Stan, my objective, my job, if you will, that's not a great descriptor, but for ease, my job is to make my case to the Liberian people, to the CPP partisans, to tell them why I want to be the standard bearer, and therefore, by extension, why I want to serve our people. And that's what I'm focused on doing. Liberians will make their own comparisons, their own contrast, in terms of deciding who they believe is best to move this country forward. And so I will repeat, I think I bring the right experiences for what Liberia needs now, for what we need today. Liberia needs processes, systems. Liberia needs accountability. Liberia needs the right team of people that will move this country forward. Liberia needs people, somebody who will deliver results. So I make my case, and then you on this panel, those listening to my voice and others will make the comparison, the contrast as to the experiences I bring versus anybody else who's aspiring to.
So in case you are the standard bearer, what do you look for in your VP? and who among the 4 political party you're going to select to be your VP, if you decide though?
Yeah. So again, I was the characteristics I would like the VP to have. So in no particular order, I want a person who I would be comfortable if, God forbid, something happened to me, could step in and replace me, and the country will not miss a beat. Because that's actually the primary role of the VP, is in the unfortunate passing of the president, they step into that role. And so the first thing I want to make sure is that I believe, and by the way, we'll get a team of people to help make that decision. We'll set up a career, we'll get input, we'll get a team of folks that says collectively we think Stanton is the guy, Ben is the guy, Tomlin, Keith or whoever, right? But that's key criteria. The next criteria for me is, the kind of thinking, the principles, the values. Do we think alike? Will they carry on the same goals and objectives we're trying to accomplish? Yes, we'll look at the constituencies they bring. Constituency broadly defined, right? So both geographic constituencies, but also do they have more appeal than I do to women or to youth or whatever other group? But the constituencies, do they bring other resources to bear to decisions? So there will be a list of things we'll look at, criteria we'll look at. We'll get a group of people to help us decide. That person likely come from within the CPP. In fact, our framework agreements, which I have to abide by, that person needs to come from in the CPP. It doesn't mean it will be another CPP standard bearer necessarily. It may be, it may not be, but they will come from within the CPP. But we'll have a set of criteria. We'll get a team of people. They will do the vetting. They will recommend, and then we'll select from a list of 2 or 3 people that will recommend who they think should be, and they will help. That will help establish the criteria as well. I'll give you some examples of the criteria I have. They may add to the list of criteria. Would get a group of people, will assess them, will interview them, and the best person to be VP.
Can you please clarify the framework state? The standard bearer, is the framework also stating the VP position should come from within the 4 political parties, like the standard bearership?
Yes.
Can you clarify that?
It does.
Okay. So your VP probably will be one of the 3 then, or one of the 4.
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Or not necessarily.
Maybe, but not necessarily. It does not prescribe who. It just says to select from amongst partisans in the 4 political parties. It does not prescribe it has to be one of the other standard bearers.
Yeah, you think you can take one of the other standard bearers? You think you will be taking one of the other standard bearers?
I'm not ruling that. No, I'm not ruling that out. I'm just saying we shouldn't presuppose that it will be, but I'm not ruling it out. It's very possible that we may take one of the other standard bearers.
Thank you for Ben. You want to speak on this question? You want to jump into this?
No.
Standard bearer thing, because we got to go to the next topic. Then we'll start from you, Ben. We're going to start from you, please. But let's talk about impunity. We're missing that out because we are not jumping into that, Mr. Cummings. Talk to us just 1 or 2 minutes about impunity and what would be so important for Liberia right now. So in case Mr. Cummings come 2024, he's the next president, then the rest of the guys will jump in on impunity.
Yeah, look, I think we've touched on impunity indirectly. We're all using the word during the course of the conversation. And it goes back to the urging that we live in a country where you can get away with anything. There are no consequences for what you do. And that's something we have to put an end to. I mentioned earlier, there will be no quote unquote sacred cows, no special, this is my special child, you can't touch him or her no matter what they do. We have to have consequences for bad behavior, and we got to reward good behavior. And that is something I'm determined that we have to do, because we'll never end this era of impunity. Let's also talk about, because it comes up all the time, quote unquote war, economic crimes court. My answer to that is very specific, and let me say that, look, Liberians want and need justice listen very carefully, want justice for economic and war crimes. We as people have to define how that justice is delivered to Liberian people. We have to do that. We'll have to decide the combination of restorative, retributive, because when you loosely use the War Economic Crimes Court, something immediately implement the TRC agreement. That may or may not be what we do. Some people think, let's take people to The Hague, or let's use the ceremonial model. I want Liberians to define how they want that justice administered. And one of the first things we'll do in our first 100 days, we'll appoint a commission on reconciliation that will look at reconciliation holistically, including how we bring justice for war economic crimes. And so that's part of how we end this era of impunity. But we got to define for ourselves what that means, how we go about doing it, what's the balance between retributive and restorative. We got to look at all of those elements, define it, and we got to put it got to be time bound, because otherwise it will consume us, right? But we got to define it, we got to do it, and then we got to get on with it. And then we got to focus on this in consequence. This thing about doing whatever you want to get away with it, that's not what I have any interest in doing.
Thank you, Chairman, hold on, Chairman, hold on 1 minute. Let's just do the same thing. Just one question quick, but you can go first, okay?
Sure. Well, I have a follow up with the war economics crime thing, but then there's a question that I wanted to add that I think is very important. The TRC report. Some may say there's no need for another commission. You're saying that in your first 100 days you're going to set up a commission. Some may say that the recommendations of the TRC is very clear, right? It gives you a clear roadmap on how to achieve this justice that we're talking about. Why not just settle for full implementation of the TRC report that will lead to war crimes, that will lead to, palaver hut, because like I say, it's an exhaustive document. Why not, Mr. Cummings, if you were president, settle for full implementation of the TRC report rather than going through another bureaucratic structure to set up another commission? And before you answer that, I want to just chime this in because I know the other guys will come in. There's something that is very concerning right now in our country is the issue of drugs with young people. I would also like to hear what your opinions are on the issue of illicit drugs being used by young people, and what will a Cummings administration do to address that?
Yeah, so Ben, the TRC report, there are different points of views on that report. I've actually been in forums where people strongly advocate for the implementation of the TRC report, and I've been in the same forums where people are completely on the opposite side of the spectrum. And indeed, setting up, and I mentioned it will be time-bound, it will not be bureaucratic, and they may indeed adapt and take most of the recommendations of the TRC report. There's also been a long time lag between that report and where we are now. And so things have changed, and so I do believe we need a fresh look. But the point is, the outcome though is that we want justice for economic and war crimes, right? And so, and any of this period of impunity. On the drugs issue, we have to do a combination of things, right? On the one hand, we gotta understand why our people are taking drugs, and how can we address some of those issues, lack of employment, coming from broken homes, whatever the sources are, we need to fix this systemically. Then we need to try to drive the flow of drugs, the supply. And then there are some people we need to punish. There got to be consequences for the consumption of illegal drugs. So it's a combination of things to address. But the most important part for me is the reasons why, the sources. For many of these people, if they have skills, they were gainfully employed, or they were educated, they were in schools, you will begin to solve a lot of the dependency on drugs. But that's a major what we do, but we have to also look at cutting out the supply chain, et cetera, to address that as an issue.
All right, Dr. Cummings, thank you. You come to Liberia with an exemplary record. You made money. You could have lived any part of the world and live a good life, happy life, and comfortable. But you decided to go to Liberia and run for president, which is a very difficult thing. If you, let me say, why Liberia, and if you are elected as president of Liberia, one of the things that Liberians complain about is that justice is not safe. People steal and they go free. The judicial system is a complete mess. Will you assure the Liberian people that even if it's the previous government, you will go after them robustly and they give account of every of the corruption in the country? Will you assure the Liberian people that you will do that?
The answer is absolutely yes. But we will be guided by the rule of law. We'll be guided by processes. Henry, we're not going to pick on any one person or persons per se, but we will go after corrupt officials, past, present, and in the future. So the direct answer to your question is yes, we will do that. But again, we'll be guided by the rule of law. We can't be gangsters about it. We can't be trying to do good and breaking the law in the process. That again is not what we need to be doing. That would be self-defeating. But no, as I mentioned earlier, nobody will be exempt. Nobody will be exempt. And by the way, call me Alex or Mr. Cummings, whatever. You have an earned doctorate, I'm assuming.
No, I got an honorary like you, so that's why I'm using it.
So, if I may come in here quickly, please. I hope you are getting.
Hold on, Deputy Minister. Let's get to Money George first, please, Mr. Minister.
Mr. Cummings, in recent times there have been deaths in our country. We lost some civil servants. Right now, there's the issue of 3 missing boys. Now, I mean, what will your Cummings administration do differently than in handling what we have experienced over the last couple of years, the last year or so, concerning the deaths in our country? Because Liberians today, families of these people who died, they are still not satisfied. They're still concerned that there's something that was a foul play. So, what difference will Cummings administration do if regarding the deaths of our missing fellow citizens? And
Yeah.
just since we got time to, okay, I know the former vice president he said his agenda is roads, and the core person we have barroom medicine. Then we're also hearing about and then also he said he's the only person in the CPP that can beat President we are. So I want you to just tell us just to address these issues. And then my first question, please, sir.
So with regards to missing deaths and people being killed and that kind of stuff, we talked about it a little bit, Tomlin, in an earlier question, that we need to make sure that this police and other agencies responsible for this have the right people, have the right resources, they can properly investigate. We also, because part of some of this stuff is due to the economic hardships, people find ways to manifest that. So in the economy, we address some of this. But more importantly, though, for example, those young professional auditors that are killed and we still don't have any explanation of their deaths. Every professional Liberian in these agencies need to understand that nobody will go after them in a CPP-led administration, that they will be allowed to do their job because our behaviors, you see, when you're confident in your behaviors, in the example you set, and what you expect of the people around you, etc., you have no fear of anybody investigating because they were not in it, which is what my situation happens to be today. People look and make stuff up, etc. So we will make sure that we're running a government of integrity, and people will be allowed to do their jobs without fear of any consequence happening to them. And then we'll go after people who bring harm to them by making sure, again, the institutions that are supposed to do that are well equipped with the right people. Will depoliticize the police and these institutions. And underlying economic challenges in the country, because that's the basic issue we have, right? It manifests itself in sectionalism, in tribalism. Because you have hello, can you still hear me?
Yeah, you are good, Mr. Cummings.
Yeah. So you have these institutions and stuff that have been politicized, that don't do the jobs, etc., etc. We make sure none of that stuff is happening, and people get empowered. On the question of, who can best make Mr. a one-term president, one-term administration? Look, I think the CPP. I believe whoever wins the CPP nomination, we will stick together as a collaboration, and we will be able to make Mr. Weah.
We can hear you.
Okay, we will make Mr. Weah a one-term president. So I'm going to do the work to make my case to CPP partisans. I've started to do that work now, as you know, around the country, making my case. And then, look, in the end, the partisans will decide. But I'm confident we'll do the work, we'll be successful, and collectively, together, I believe.
Yeah, thank you so much. Mr. There is something that has been lingering around, and this cloud to me hangs on your head, that I think a lot of Liberians have not actually heard a very clear response from you. Or sometimes back during an interview with the late Mamadi Diakate, you asked of this issue of gay rights. And you said in your response, quote, "This is a lifestyle you struggle with." Since then, you've not been clear as to where you stand on the issue of gays' rights. And as a leader, one of those things you want very clearly is for your supporters, the people, to know what decisions you have been taking. You may want to speak, and quickly before I end. In 2017 as well, you said if you did not win the 2017 elections, you will not contest again. And today we are talking about integrity. And I'm sure very happy that you are putting integrity at the core front of our governance process. Mr. Cummings, do you see any disconnect between the integrity you are speaking of and you not holding strong to your word that indeed you wouldn't contest if you did not win in 2017?
So I'll answer both questions. I'll just do it in reverse order. So what integrity issue is there by changing your mind? So how is that an integrity issue? At a point in time, you have a point of view, you make a statement, circumstances change, the environment change, your situation change, and you have a different point of view. What does that do with integrity? Have you in your life not said, I don't think I will do this, or I will do this? Situation change, and you decide, what, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. How does that? What does that have to do with my integrity? The fact that at one point, I thought, no, maybe I'll go for it. If it doesn't work, I'll go do something else. It's been what, 4 years, almost 4 years since the 2017 election. So I don't know how you. Again, I say people try to make up here, but you having a change of view, a change of mind. I see it nothing to do with integrity. And again, look at my history, look at my background, look at how I live my life, look at resources I manage. And if you can point to a real violation of the law or whatever, then let's have that conversation about integrity. On a gay rights issue, again, I don't know. Again, forgive me because we have a robust conversation here, right? What rock you be under though about me not addressing this gay rights issue? I've said emphatically that I do not support the gay rights issues, that particular lifestyle. you know, that interview was taken completely out of context, and it comes up because people have nothing to point towards, right? And they sort of make up this stuff. And so let me say to Liberian people, since you say I'm not hitting it head on, it's not a lifestyle I support. I'm a Christian, I'm a married man, I've got 2 children, I got 4 grandchildren, I've been married for 39 years. Again, less people look at the history, look at the background, look at the lifestyle, and they will understand that I've been very unequivocal about my position on that issue. So since you said I haven't hit it on, I'm hitting it on now. And so you and everybody else can hear it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cummings. Gentlemen, we got 5 minutes. Kev Hassan, 1 question. We go back to Ben Sevi, Thomas, and George, and we will close this interview. If you have any further question, whenever Mr. Cummings come back on, I believe would give him more questions. Kev Hassan, please.
Mr. Cummings, thank you for making that point and clear. You know, I was thinking of that question too, but thank you for making it clear. But one thing you're not making clear to me right now, it's about integrity that you're trying to bring in this presidency. You still within the CPP, you're still dining with people who have integrity problem. If you cannot straighten that within your surrounding, how can the Liberian people believe you that you will straighten that when you become president? And second, again, quick, will you take any vice presidency if you don't become the nominee?
Yeah, if look, you keep coming back, asking the same question in a different way, and I've given the answer you're gonna get from me with regards to that, and I'm referring to the whole integrity issue. So again, I don't want to keep repeating myself on the VP issue. Look, I would answer you from a few perspectives. One is we are in a tournament. We're in a competition here. You know, it's like I use this example. I was in Nima recently, and I was like, look, it's like the Nima teams practicing and going to the county meet, and then some Nibayans say to the team, "You'll go play for second." They haven't played one game yet. How does that make sense? How does the question, you know, let's run the tournament, let's play the game, let's win the game. That's what we want to do. And then the other thing I would say to you, Kev, on that question is, many people suggest that because they don't want to make a decision. It's a cop-out. If Liberians believe Mr. Ye, Senator Lawrence, Dr. Boykai are their choice, they need to support them, and that is okay. That's the truth. They think that those are the best people to lead our country. If they believe I'm the best choice, they should support me. We should make a choice. We will force a choice. Because that's, again, part of why this country is where it is. We all settling. We try not to hurt anybody's feelings. You know, okay, you know, go to another VP, etc., etc., etc. Nonsense, right? Let's run the course. Let's play the tournament. Let's see who wins the tournament, and let's accept the outcome of the tournament. And that's what we want. We want people to do. Let's make a choice.
If Boyka win the nominee, will you accept the VP? Will you accept to be the VP if he wins?
What kind of question is that? Let me ask you why I say what kind of question is that, right? Mm-hmm. That presupposes, and it's a hypothetical, that Mr. Boyka has a right to pick who he wants.
If he chooses you, will you accept?
Listen now. Listen here. He has a right to pick who he wants to be his VP. I'm not going to presuppose, and you cannot be running for an office And you say to your supporters, oh, if I pick VP, I will accept it. Everybody will run away from you guys. You're supposed to be politicians here. Think about the question before you ask. And oh, by the way, people are suggesting and saying that I should go, or in which one I'm doing, to lead the CPP and then to make Mr. Weah a one-time president. And that's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm working on. And VP for me is not on the radar screen today. Let's run the tournament. Let's see where it ends up, and then we move forward.
Mr. Cummings, we're going to let you go after chairman and somebody jump in. You got a son by the name Bwaka. Am I correct?
That's correct, yes.
You know, when we came across the name, we're like, and your friend were over in Bwaka with former VP Bwaka, and we saw the name. We're like, did he name your son? I mean, godfather to your son? The name Bwaka came from where? Now we're talking about VP Bwaka and Cummings.
No, the name Boykai came from an uncle I had who was Boykai passed away. In fact, one of my first cousins is Boykai passed away, and we liked the name. And so we named our son Boykai, but it comes from that side of the family. My mother's sister, younger sister, had passed away, and it's through that link the Boykai name came. My daughter name is Ayo, after my mother. My maternal grandfather was from Nigeria, and that's the Ayodele, the link. So just going back to some of the heritage we bring in naming our kids. So that's where the Boykai came from.
Mr. Alexander Cummings, we'll allow you to take the last question then, because we are so out of time from Chairman Ben Senvi. Thank you very much, sir. Chairman Senvi.
Cummings, and thanks for being so generous with your time. We know you're a busy man. My question is very simple. If you were in a debate today with President Weah, you're the CPP standard bearer, President Weah is the CDC standard bearer, and just the two of you guys, right? No disrespect to the rest of the people who may be running. What would be that number one issue you will hit hard on the president? What would be that issue that you will try to distinguish between you and Mr. President and try to score that point on him? You know how when they say there's a close debate and the person someone did a knockout punch, what would be that knockout punch that you would want to hit on Mr. President?
Yeah, there are a few knockout punches. Unfortunately, I'm not going to give you one. But one would be the whole issue around corruption and the kleptocratic government that he's running, and I will hit on that.
So do you believe he's running a kleptocratic government? Do you believe he's running?
Yeah, I believe that, yes.
And you believe that Mr. President is corrupt?
I believe so, yes.
Go ahead.
And then the second area I will hit him on is on the economy, on the management of the economy, on the suffering of the Liberian people, on the hardships our people are facing, on the fact that civil service were reduced and they're still not getting paid every month. And it would go on and on. All the healthcare workers were striking, teachers striking, the people at the Capitol building striking. Liberian people get a verdict on December 8th on this president. And so the list goes on and on. But the management of the economy, with the other area, we want he and I to go toe to toe, head to head, on explaining how we grow and expand the economy. What action we take, what things will we do, how will we restore confidence, good governance, because all those things are important to grow the economy. And so I want to speak to him about corruption, integrity, and the kleptocracy, and then I want to talk about the economy, because that is what affects the Liberian people, the bread and butter. How is going to create jobs for Liberian people? Those will be the two areas that will be the two knockout punches in a debate. And I would love the opportunity to debate President Weah. I would relish the opportunity to get on a debate stage, just he and I, and go after not just those two issues, though, but all the current issues that are facing our country. I would love that opportunity.
Then while we end here, Mr. Cummings, while we end here, do you want us to? Will you then suggest that you guys should have a debate about the CPP candidates?
I would welcome that, absolutely. I would love to debate with anybody, gentlemen, to have a debate with anybody who is competing for the leadership of our country.
In your closing, sir, can you, in your closing, can you also include this one thing? And I'm begging you, sir, in your closing, speak to the women of Liberia. Speak to the young women of Liberia. And though we never had the time to ask you a question concerning that, women education, women initiative, can you include that in your closing? And we can have a day. Thank you.
Yeah, so it was on the list of things I'll comment on in my closing, but so let me start there since it. And as I mentioned earlier, the key constituents I think I do have are the women voters of Liberia. I think women understand that I believe in gender equality. I think women understand, I believe in affirmative action, by the way. Let me go on record by saying if we want gender equality, we have to take affirmative actions. We have to mandate that it happens. It will not just happen, it will just take too long and forever to happen if we don't do that. And that's something I'm committed to. I understand the gender imbalance in our country. The whole sexual gender-based violence has got to stop. Look at the statistics around gender violence. We as Liberian men should be ashamed. We should be embarrassed. And this is something that we got to tackle, we got to take head on. And we got to make sure the justice system is prepared to do that, that we don't victimize women twice. We got to make sure we speak to the families that they shouldn't victimize these people, the women indirectly, and make excuses, oh, keep it quiet, blah, blah, blah. We cannot allow that to happen. These are the things that need to change. And so women of Liberia will have a supporter, a friend, a believer in gender equality, because I think one of the keys to uplifting and moving our country forward. But I also want to end with a few other things here. One is my continual refrain that we can't do the same thing and different results. We have to do many things differently, including selecting people with different experiences, and not based on popularity, sympathy, or whatever else. And many things have to change when our country goes forward. We gotta stop settling for mediocrity. We gotta be prepared to push each other, to be demanding of each other if we want Liberia to be forward. And if I'm blessed to serve our people, I want to be pushed. I want the bar to be set high, because that's how we change and move our country forward. I also don't want us to forget, and we didn't this gentleman, elections integrity. In 2023, presidency, the half of the Senate, the entire House of Representatives, does the National Election Commission have the ability, the capacity to conduct that election with integrity review? Are they being appropriately resourced? It's a partisan commission. You all need to start thinking about review, start addressing this and calling out the government, right? Two other things I will say to you before I leave you.
Mr. Cummings, just before you, let me interrupt you, please.
The best, no, don't interrupt me, please. The best predictor of future behavior and future performance is past behavior and past performance. The best predictor is past. So as Liberians make the decision, let's look at past behavior, past performance as a major consideration deciding the way forward. And then the last thing I want to leave Liberians with is let's not forget the spiritual side of the change that's required in our country. Yes, we are focused on the physical side, the rational side, but there's a spiritual side, and we as Christians, as Muslims, religions, to make sure we're asking God, asking Allah, to make sure it helps move our country forward. I think that is not only important. And then it ties lastly to the need to engage the hearts and minds of Nigeria in this transformation. No one person can change our country. We need the right leader to set the tone, to make the choices, priorities, to set the example. But all of us collectively have to work together to change this country. Everybody got to do their share. Everybody got to do something different. Everybody got to make a sacrifice. It will not change because I say so, because you say so. It will not change because we talk it, because we're good at talking. It will because we wish it. Liberia will change because we do the work and we make the sacrifice. If we're not prepared to do that, it will not change. And the next group will be here 3 years from now, 6 months, having these same conversations. And I have no interest in having those kind of conversations. I want us to make the sacrifices, to do the work, and they could do that, Liberia would. We have to be in a hurry to do this. We are behind. We gotta work. We gotta work ceaselessly.